Here's how I make kombucha at my house. So I've been doing this for a little while. I watched a lot of videos to kind of get started. I made quite a few errors. I'm going to share all the tips that I use to make kombucha here. Okay, so tip number one. First thing I've learned, I was using tap water and not boiling the chlorine out of it. So I use tap water. Our municipality here uses chlorine to treat the water, which I think is pretty normal, just to make the water clean and easy to drink. But that's not good for kombucha. So you can either let the water sit for 24 hours and let the chlorine evaporate, or you can boil it out. So what I do is I just boil all my water that I'm going to use for the kombucha, and let it come down to temperature, so I'm not going to kill my scoby. But basically you need to boil the water, cook out the chlorine, bring it down to about 90 degrees, and then you can introduce the scoby into this once we get there. So making kombucha is really a double fermentation, two-step process. So this first step in the process, we brew our tea. So this is gonna make 4 gallons of tea. Like I said, I'm gonna make my tea here, dilute it with this water, and that'll give me 4 gallons. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna make the tea. Once it comes to temperature, we're gonna introduce our scoby into there, and we're gonna let it ferment for 10 days. After that 10 days, you take this out, and then you introduce whatever fruit juice or flavorings you want, and you do a second fermentation. So the second fermentation is done at room temperature again. So I'm gonna put it in bottles, then I'm gonna put my fruit juice in there, and I'm gonna let it sit for 5 days. So I do a 10-day first ferment, and then a 5-day second ferment. After 5 days, I take all the kombucha that has the fruit juice in it, and I just put it in the fridge. And the fridge is just gonna stop that fermentation process. And I chose 5 days just because it introduces a good level of carbonation, and it doesn't take too long. So we're gonna switch over to the second ferment. We got our water boiling over here. We're just cooking out the chlorine. We're gonna make our second ferment and get this done so we can have all this bottled and put it away and taken care of, so we can just focus on making the first ferment for our new batch. So what we wanna do, I have a bowl that I'm gonna put my scobies in, and I'm gonna take 6 cups from my kombucha that's ready for the second ferment, and we're gonna put it in this bowl, and I'm gonna cover this, and then once this water and this tea is cool enough, I'm gonna put this scoby and this kombucha back in with this tea, and we're gonna put them back in these containers, okay? So first things first, we're gonna take these covers off of here. And this stuff always looks funky, it's just the way it is. So we have some scobies that are floating on the top. We're gonna pull these scobies out, and we're gonna put them in this bowl. I'm gonna do that with this container. And then this is my second container of kombucha. We'll pull these scobies out. And what happens is you always get the fresh scoby on the top there. So I always make sure that I use that top scoby. I put that in my container, and that's everything. And then over here I have a scoby hotel. So this is just where I put my extra scobies, and I'll put some extra tea in here as well every single time that I make kombucha. So now when I get my 6 cups, I want to make sure that I give this a good stir. You can also taste your kombucha to see if you like how it tastes. We're going to take some cups out of this. You can see all the bubbles on the side of this measuring cup, hopefully. 2, 3, 4. So we got 4 cups out from this one. I'm gonna take a couple cups out of this to get my 6. I probably have enough fluid here already, but we're just gonna add some more just to be safe. And to make some room for mixing our juice in here as well. So this is done. So we're just gonna take some plastic wrap and cover this bowl to make sure we don't get any stuff in here that we don't want while we're making our second ferment and waiting for that other water and tea to cool down to temperature. So we'll set this over here. Same with the scoby hotel. We don't really need this out right now. This is just extra scobies that I like to have on hand in case something happens with my main scobies that I put in the bowl there. This is all stirred. Now for flavorings, you can kind of use whatever you like. I've used mango, and mango's really good. I think guava's really good. I just got some mango passion fruit from Costco. I get these 2 packs. This is a mango passion fruit that I just saw last time I went in there. I'll mix this up and I'll just get this entire container. So this is 64 ounces. I'll take all 64 ounces of this and put it into my kombucha, and we'll do the second ferment for 5 days. So I'll just basically pour it in. And now this isn't gonna be perfectly the same since it's 2 different sized containers, but it gets close enough for me. And this is easier than trying to make it perfect. So we'll pour this in. Most of it needs to go in this one, obviously, since it's a bigger container. And now I have my juice added, and you can see all the bubbles going in there, hopefully. Let me show you. So you can see how happy it is. We got our fruit juice added to our first ferment tea here. This is roughly 4 gallons of liquid. I have some kombucha bottles that I saved from other bottles that I've bought in the past. I still haven't actually bought new bottles. I've used these and reused them many, many times, and they're still good, so I'm not too worried about it. So I have all of this. I have a little funnel right here. And what we'll do is we'll just fill these bottles up. And I fill them almost all the way up to the top. So there'll be a little bit of room on the top just for some air in there. I don't like to take them all the way up. So what we'll do is we'll fill these up, and then I'll wash off all the excess kombucha just in case some comes out the sides. And then we'll let these sit on this towel and I'll dry them off. Then we're just gonna start pouring into these jars. Did I get most of it in the bottle? And it took me about 3 months to learn and do a lot of trial and error to figure out what works. But I finally found a recipe that works really well for me. And now I really enjoy making kombucha. So making 4 gallons, I get usually about 9 or 10 of these bottles. And yeah, $9 a bottle. That's a lot of money that I save every single 10 days. The one thing you can do is you can fill up a plastic container with your kombucha and let this ferment for the same amount of time that you're doing the glass bottles. And you can kind of squeeze the bottle and see just how carbonated it is in here. So we'll do that with this, especially since I ran out of glass bottles. All right, so at this point I have all of my bottles filled. I'm just gonna put the lids on them. I'm gonna close them as tight as I can. We're gonna rinse them off to get all this excess kombucha off, and we're just gonna dry them all before we store them. We got lids on all of them. So now all my bottles are filled. This is for my second fermentation. I'm gonna dry all these bottles off with a towel, make sure they're all dry, and I'm gonna store them back in this upper cupboard, and they're gonna sit there for 5 days. After 5 days, what happens is these are gonna get carbonated in here at room temperature. I'm gonna pull them, put them in the fridge, and then they're ready to enjoy once they're cold. So now I'm gonna wash these 2 vessels for my first fermentation once this water in this tea has cooled off enough. Once that's under 90, what I'll do is I'll pour it into these 2 jars, and then I'll reintroduce my scobies and my kombucha from my last batch. And then this will ferment in this cupboard for 10 days. This is a ratio that I find that work really well when I make kombucha. I've tried a bunch of different recipes, and this is what works the best. So I do 84 grams of tea, 1,075 grams of organic cane sugar, and I do that to 4 gallons of water. It works perfect every single time. Yeah. So let's measure away. We need 84 grams of black tea. This is loose leaf black tea. All right, so we have our sugar measured, we have our tea measured. We'll go ahead and make the tea. Water's boiling. So what we'll do is we'll turn this heat off. Like I said, this has been boiling already for 15 minutes, so that water is ready to go. We just got to let it cool down to 90 degrees or less. We're going to make our tea in this water. So we have 84 grams of loose leaf black tea. Right, Grace? Yeah. And then we have 1,075 grams of the organic cane sugar here. We'll try not to get it everywhere. Yeah. Let this steep for 15 minutes, and we just need to stir it so that the sugar doesn't get stuck to the bottom of the pot. And you could do this a couple different ways. You could also just steep the tea and then add the sugar in later. But I like to put everything in all at once. Show him the helper. There's my helper. So just to make this easier for you to see, I have everything on this table. So I have the water that I brought to boil and I cooked for 15 minutes just to cook the chlorine out because I'm using tap water, remember? So I cooked that out. I checked the temperature. It's down to 90 degrees, so we're good to move forward. This was the 4-quart pot that I had that had the tea in it with the sugar. I already strained it and I put it in here. So I put plastic wrap on top of these jars just to make sure I didn't get anything in the jars or the liquid while I was waiting for the temperature to come down. And then now what we'll do is we'll dilute the tea. So we're gonna mix this concentrated tea and the sugar with this big pot of water. And then we're gonna put it in these 2 different containers. And we're gonna reintroduce the kombucha and also the scobies that I have. And then I have this scoby hotel here as well. So basically, you end up getting an extra scoby every time you make kombucha. And if you put too many scobies in when you make your kombucha, it gets really acidic. So what I do is I usually just keep 1 scoby in here, and then I'll put the extras in here. So if you don't have a scoby and you don't have kombucha to start with, you can order this stuff online. So you buy a bag and it's got the scoby in it, and it also has a starter tea. You just want to make sure that it's unflavored kombucha. Or you can still find plain, unflavored, raw kombucha in a couple stores. So when I first made kombucha, I made 2 gallons. I made this jar here because when I went to go buy the scoby and the kombucha, I didn't have enough liquid or enough scobies to do this. But since I've been doing it for a while, obviously I have enough kombucha and I have enough scobies to make kombucha at home. So my first batch, I went to the store, I bought the kombucha, I made the tea, I put the store-bought kombucha with the SCOBY inside my tea, I let it ferment, and then I just kind of continued bulking up my kombucha until I'm to the point now where I make 4 gallons at a time. All right, so we're gonna mix these liquids and get them into these 2 containers. So we'll pour this into here. It's kind of hard to get everything in there. All right, here goes. All right, so I got a little bit of tea kind of everywhere. Let me clean this mess up. So at this point, we're gonna take our scobies. We're gonna put 1 in each of these big jars. And then I'm just gonna evenly distribute this liquid back into these jars. And then whatever extra I have, I'll probably dump out some of this because this is pretty vinegary at this point. So I'll dump out some of this liquid from my SCOBY hotel, and then I'll just put in some fresh tea with the kombucha in here as well. So you'll see that some of these scobies are kind of an odd size. This is a fresher one that I got from this one earlier, so we'll put this back in there. Not that it really matters, but I do like to put the same ones back in if I can, just because they're the same shape as the container that they just came from. And we'll put this in here. I'm gonna put this liquid back in here, clean them off. We'll mix it up, and then we're gonna let this ferment for 10 days. So we'll give this a stir. I like to push the SCOBY down to the bottom, make sure that the kombucha gets mixed up with the tea. I still have a little bit of extra tea, so I'll put some tea in here. We'll just dry this off. I have these linens, and I'll just take these linens. It's best to do some kind of linens like this. These are basically napkins, but any kind of thin towel or linen or something like that is ideal. And then I just throw these on top. I throw a rubber band on them. And this way they can still breathe, but nothing can get in here. Let's just put this on top. This is gonna sit room temperature in a cupboard for 10 days, undisturbed, in a dark area. And after 10 days, we'll pull this out and then we'll move on to the second ferment. So once you get in the rhythm, every 10 days you're making more tea, which then becomes kombucha. And it's just kind of this never-ending cycle where you're always feeding it. You always have kombucha to drink. For us, we drink about 4 gallons every 10 days, roughly. So this is what works for us. This is how I make kombucha. I've been doing it for a while. I've learned kind of a lot of stuff along the way, and this is the ratio that works the best for me. The last thing I wanted to do was show you the finished product. So this is kombucha that's already gone through the second ferment. It sat for 5 days. I put it in the fridge. It's already cold. I haven't opened this one up yet, but we'll pour a glass and we'll pour it in there and I'll show you what it looks like, just so you can see what the finished product looks like. So it kind of looks like beer when you pour it. It's pretty frothy on the top. And this one is mango. So that's how I make kombucha. Make sure you comment below if you make this recipe, how well it worked for you, and what your favorite flavor is. We all like different flavors, so I'd love to hear what you have. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and make sure you hit the little bell so you'll be notified whenever I have new videos coming up and you don't miss anything. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.